What About Vietnam? A podcast with Carrie Newsom. The series where Carrie talks with travellers about their experiences and adventures. Find out more about Vietnam from the people who have actually been there.
What about Vietnam?
Whether it's adventure, exploring the culture and cuisine, shopping, or just soaking up the sun. Let Carrie and her travellers pave the way for a magical holiday in Vietnam.
What about Vietnam?
Xin chào and welcome to What About Vietnam. Before I jump straight into the show, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that there's been some really big news, really big exciting news about the visa situation to enter Vietnam. As from the 15th of August, you will be able to extend your stays quite dramatically. So the typical e-visa up until this point has been for those countries that it applies to, you would only be allowed 30 days. That will be extended to 90 days as of the 15th of August. I'm going to put detail of the website that you need to go to, which is the most authoritative website to use. And I use that sincerely in the sense that it's not a service-provided website. It is, in fact, the immigration website to apply directly to the Vietnam Immigration Department for your visa. So you pay the minimal fee and I've been doing that for years and I recommend all my clients to use that website. So that's where the information will be. At present, on my last check, just the last couple of days, it's not been updated to reflect this new change. But there's also significant changes to the countries that have been outlined as being waiver free. So up until this point, those countries would have 15 days in the country that they could come and visit and not have to pay any visa or apply for any visa status at all. That has now been extended to 45 days. But all the detail will be on the website. The news has really just only come out of the last 5 days. And, I'm talking to you on the 30th of June. So please check out the website, whataboutvietnam.com as soon as the full information has been released for Vietnam. I will make sure I put that on our website. But today, I'm very excited to have Simon White on. Now, Simon's been doing business and visiting Vietnam over the last 15 years and certainly has a similar love of Vietnam. He's been going back and forth. I think he said he had something like 60 trips over 15 years. He says that he's travelled extensively across the country by car, by rail, by bus, by boar, and he just loves the experience of the country, its food, and immersing himself in local culture and local traditions and just, musing through the country and really meeting people and doing all sorts of fun things. He's a fun guest. He's got some great insights into some places I've wanted to talk to you about, and they're places like Phan Thiet, which is very close to Mui Ne. We have discussed Mui Ne before on the program, but we're doing this show really with a big focus on land transport. And so we're going to be talking about train travel primarily, and that's using the reunification train from top to bottom and looking at places to visit by train. And some of those are Phan Thiet. Some of those others are like Hue, like Quy Nhon, like Da Nang, Hanoi, and of course, Ho Chi Minh City. So sit tight. It's a really jam-packed episode. Simon is wonderful at just giving his insights and experiences at a very street level, a very immersive level where he likes to, get out and mix with the locals in the cities, in the country areas and really enjoy the street food, enjoy the different traditions and the nuances between the North and the South. And I think he's going to give you some insights that might help you make up your mind as far as whether you want to do your hops around the country or even mix up your hops around the country between train or whether you go by plane to visit some of these places, as they're all interesting. But how you get there is, all part of that journey experience as well. Without further ado, let's bring on the very learned, very talented, very interesting, very fun guest, Simon White. Simon White, welcome to the What About Vietnam podcast.
Yeah, hi, Kerry. Thanks very much for having me on today.
Look, we've got a lot to talk about in our program today, but maybe just for everyone listening, you could tell us a little bit about your relationship to Vietnam. What keeps you coming back over 15 years and 60 trips, I hear?
Yes, thanks, Kerry. Look, I've got a bit of a long-term love affair with Vietnam. Mostly around business aspects, because I'm the president of the Australia-Vietnam Business Council in Queensland, and also AusCham Vietnam's representative in Queensland. I'm on the advisory board of the Australia-Vietnam Leadership Dialogue, and I spend a lot of time in the business aspect of Vietnam. But like most people that go to a new destination, over 15, 20 years ago, I've spent a lot of time also exploring Vietnam and getting to know the country, what there is to do, and the people and the excitement of visiting just different destinations around the country. I think the reason I keep going back is there's always something new to explore. There's new flavours. I don't say that from a food point of view, because we all know Vietnam is a food destination. But there's new flavours in what's happening with Vietnam and how it's growing up as a country. 100 million people as of a couple of weeks ago. And also the differences between the metropolises of Ho Chi Minh City, and the differences between that and Hanoi, and what happens all the way in between, and all those amazing places and destinations, and the amazing country areas where you're back to feeling like you're in the Vietnam of 30 or 40 years ago.
Talk to us about your most liked land-based transportation and why you would favour one over the other.
Look, I think the beauty of land-based travel, when you're in an aeroplane, and we know this also domestically in Australia, you fly over and look down at things and you have that bird's eye view, but you're not immersed in what's happening on the ground, and you're not immersed in the people and their day-to-day lives. And, we talked a little bit earlier about taking other people to Vietnam, and I quite often think when you land in the airport in Ho Chi Minh or Hanoi, it is sometimes confronting if you're not used to it. And I always refer to it as being like a deer in headlights when I take people over there. And I also always meet everybody at the airport, and they walk out into that throng of people hanging around, and that chatter and noise, and down south the heat and the smells and the aromas of an Asian city. And I think that that can be quite challenging to people. So I think that when you want to immerse yourself in culture, and this also depends on how much time you've got, because if you've got a quick trip and it's 7 to 10 days, you need to jump on a plane to see a bit of the country and get to know the differences around what happens, from the difference between the south to the north and in between. But I think if you've got a bit of time, getting down and getting on some sort of land-based travel, and we can talk about the options in a moment, really immerses you in the culture and allows you to look out the window, sit back and relax, and compare Vietnam as a country and how it's uniquely different to a lot of countries, but also the same in some ways as well. And to watch people go about their day-to-day lives, and to go through when you're on the train, for instance, you go through the backyards, not the front yards. So you don't see the shiny front of the shops and the places, but you see the backyards and the chickens and the pigs and the washing hanging out and the kids playing along the place. And, it gives you a different experience to what Vietnam is from the perspective of the Vietnamese person.
And I think that's a really good point to mention, is that, I think Vietnam's become very much a location that's big on the Instagram set, in the sense, and social media sense. Everybody's taking the front yard photos and the perfect views, and, the rice paddy fields are in there perfectly in bloom, and, all the colours are perfect and all the rest of it. Whereas you and I agreed that you can you can experience a Vietnam that is still steeped in a lot of history. You know, the minority groups aren't just dressed up for fun. They wear those clothes as their normal day-to-day wear, their traditional costumes. And I think you're right. I think seeing the backyard does give you that immersion in a greater sense. So, I mean, I've done very limited train travel, but in the case that you have got some time and you want this kind of experience, where would you base your train travel?
I think you either go south to north or north to south, and you do the whole country if you've got time. You know, the reunification train line, which was basically rebuilt after 1975 to reunify the north and the south, goes from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh, goes all over the country through all the major central towns. It's an amazing trip. You can get a sleeper. It's cheap. I won't say it's luxurious, but it's air conditioned and it's presentable and it's clean. So I think if I was to choose any mode of ground travel, as though I love getting on a motorbike and I love getting in amongst it in Vietnam, because then you feel the energy and those sorts of things. Unless you're experienced on motorbikes and you don't have kids, it's not a safe mode of transport.
Correct.
Especially on the highways. Unlike Australia, where we sort of, although motorbike riders will tell you otherwise, we're fairly observant of the rules. The smaller you are in Vietnam on the roads, the less important you are, and therefore motorbikes, aren't very important. So if I was in a city area, I wouldn't ride a motorbike. But in the country areas off the main roads and highways, I love getting on a bike and going for a ride, and I'll put my son on there with me and we'll ride around the regional roads because the traffic isn't an issue. Land-based options are motorbike, probably not safe and not comfortable unless you're an experienced rider and you want to get on a bigger bike and do the whole country. Buses, look, there's regional buses which I wouldn't get on at night time because they'll take a 20-seater and put 40 people in it, and it's terrible and it's not safe. They have the sleeping buses that are okay if you're a 5-foot Asian frame, but I'm a 6'3" Australian frame. So the sleeping bus, my feet are hanging over in someone's head, and I can never get comfortable. But also, they're not. To me, they don't feel safe, and that's just a personal thing. And especially, they're built for overnight travel and overnight.
They just don't feel hygienic to me.
So you've got private car and cars. Cars are becoming very popular. I won't say that driving ability is becoming better with the volume of traffic on the road. So, private cars are great, and their Uber equivalent, which is Grab, is great to get around the cities or regional cities.
Yep.
But longer trips, it just isn't practical. So it comes down to train. So I think the train is it's a great way to see the country. You can sit there, look out the window, see everything happening. As I say, see the backyards rather than the front yards. Watch yourself go through, rice paddies and mountain trails along the coast and back in through little towns and cities, and just look at the country that's growing up around you. And it's an amazing way in any country to travel, but certainly Vietnam. And I think the other thing with trains is I think they're pretty safe. They don't go that fast. So, so anything that does go wrong, there's not a lot that's going to happen. Not a bullet train. And I think that there's a comfort and a personal space. The three of us will travel, and what I'll do is I'll actually pay the extra bed in a sleeper to make it 4. So you have your own cabin. It costs about $20 for a trip, so it's not expensive. And then you've got your own space and you can do your own thing. And my advice would be buy some food before you leave your destination.
Correct.
So go to the shop, buy some snacks, buy some food. I would take a few beers because I'm an Aussie. Take some things you want to eat and take it on with you. No one cares. And then you've got all your supplies, and you can look at the view. You can read a book. You can watch something you've downloaded, and it's a really relaxing way to sort of sit back and see the place. And if you get a bit tired, just close your eyes and have a bit of a rest. So I think it allows you to go from Ho Chi Minh City in the south to Hanoi in the north, for instance, and have a look. And a bit like, Canada or Europe, you can have a a time-based ticket you can buy where you can get on and off as many times as you like. So you can buy what would be a Eurail type pass concept.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm. And you can buy that, and you can basically jump on and off the trains. I mean, you've got to book each leg from a seat perspective when you get on, when you want to get back on again. But you can jump off at all these small destinations and ask the people in the train station, or I find when you ask taxi drivers and people where to stay, 90% of the time you're going to get somebody who's going to be pretty straight up with you and say, look, there's a great hotel in town, or what are you looking for, or there's a place to go. So I usually think the advice of the locals is really good. So if you went, for instance, from Ho Chi Minh City going north, I would recommend that people need to stop in places like Phan Thiet, which is also Munay, which is the famous kite surfing beach of days gone by, the Fairy Creek or whatever they call it.
Fairy stream, yeah.
Fairy stream, which you get to the top and you find out it just comes out as rice paddies, but it's a beautiful walk.
Yes.
Clean thing, but it actually just comes off the runoff from the rice paddies and the farms. But it is a nice little walk. And Phan Thiet's a seafood town. If you've ever watched Luke Nguyen's series, he cooks on the streets of Phan Thiet quite often because he's got family there. So, it's a seafood town, so you'll always find a really good seafood meal there. I went to a seafood buffet there when I was there in December last year. It was $10 all you can eat seafood.
Oh, my God. I'm in heaven. Mm.
But the interesting thing is, whatever you wasted, they weighed, and you had to pay them for every 100 grams of waste you had.
So you're kidding. That's amazing. I mean, that's an interesting concept.
But the food was amazing. It was just so much fresh seafood, and $10 you could sit there all night and eat as much as you want to. So, those sorts of things in Phan Thiet are great.
What's the accommodation like in Phan Thiet?
Well, I usually stay there with family, so for me it's easy. But if there's a lot of hotels there. But if you look at Munay Beach, for interest, there's resorts.
Oh yeah, there's resorts in Munay for sure,
and there's lots of them. And again, look, along the beachfront, I can picture, but I can't give you names of 4 or 5. There's a couple of really good resorts there. I'm not a 5-star resort traveller, so they're not the pick for me. I'm more of a get down amongst it, sort of person. So for me, I'm more of a sort of 3-star. As long as I've got a clean bathroom of my own, I'm happy. So for me, it's about sort of casting around and looking at what options there are and what's interesting. And places like Phan Thiet have just a good feel about them. And again, it's a safe town if you like to ride a motorbike. Just be careful if you're not licensed in riding a motorbike in Vietnam. You don't have a license there, then you are going to have insurance issues. And I would never recommend anybody go there without having a license to ride a bike, because I do know of a European guy who had with his girlfriend had a motorbike accident. She was killed, and he was put in jail for 7 years because he hadn't no license. And this is many years ago. So, it's one of those places. But Phan Thiet's a beautiful place to stop. It's on the train line. It's hot, but it's near the beach, and it's a great lesser known destination. And Munay Beach was very, very popular, of course, with the Russians for a long time, but not as much these days. But the money going into the resorts there from an investment perspective means that the opportunities to stay there, the opportunities of accommodation are increasing all the time.
I'm really glad that you've covered off Phan Thiet, because it's an area I don't know as much about. I've got a Vietnamese girlfriend of mine who's just moved back there with her family, because her family own farmland there, and they're doing farming in dragon fruit. So it's a place I want to go to when I visit next time. The other train trip I've heard is very nice that maybe you can speak to about for everyone is the trip from Da Nang to Hue.
Da Nang to Hue. Well, I've done Da Nang to Dong Hoi to go up to Phong Nha to the caves and mountains areas that we talked about earlier. But with that trip from Da Nang to Hue, it goes along the coastline, the mountainous coastline north of Da Nang. So you go up through the pass and through the tunnels north of Da Nang, and it's just absolutely beautiful trip. Unfortunately, with the configuration, if you've got a sleeper, the sleeper is actually on the mountainside, So you've got to keep your sort of room door open to look out to the aisle side.
Oh, it's on the wrong side.
It's on the wrong
right.
side. Most people just stand in the aisle and look at the view for half an hour to an hour as you go through there. And
Are you better to do it the other way then? Are you better to do it from
flip around and come south?
way? Yeah.
I've never done that, but I'm assuming if you go south, I don't know whether they turn the train around or they just have an engine at the other end and then the carriage is the same way. Because quite often the train carriages, they just hook up an engine to the other end and go back. It does, the train doesn't turn around itself, so the carriages are still going to have the same configuration. But that said, if you get a day train that leaves, there's a few of them, but there's one that leaves about 10 a.m. from Da Nang to go north. So if you're doing that Da Nang to Hue trip, and you go through there, the view is absolutely amazing, and it's just a great way to spend sort of the day.
And it's only about 3 hours.
So if you leave at 10, you're going to get in just after lunch, and really nice, really relaxing, beautiful view.
And then does it go Da Nang, Hue, and then Dong Hoi? Is that the way it goes?
It goes Hue, Dong Ha, Dong Hoi, and all the way up. So it just goes all the way up through Ninh Binh and up into Hanoi from there. So it just
right. Have you done it all the way to Ninh Binh?
No. I've only done Ninh Binh I've done Hanoi to Ninh Binh, and then I've gone as far as Dong Hoi.
Well, there's 2 trains that go to Quy Nhon now, isn't there? There's the new Viatage through the Anantara group. They are running that, and that's kind of like from what I can gather, is like the Orient Express version with the bar and it's very swish, and you can do that trip. And then, as you say, there's the reunification train that goes to Quy Nhon. Now, can you talk to us a little bit about Quy Nhon? Because for everyone listening, Quy Nhon is an area that was a bit of a best-kept secret, really, for Vietnamese, as in for locals knew how beautiful it was. But it's now becoming very much a tourist destination, and there's a lot of resorts being built over the last few years, and it's really coming of age, so to speak. So, Simon, would love you to touch on that trip from Da Nang to Quy Nhon and tell us a little bit about Quy Nhon. You may see at the beginning of the show notes in the podcast channel that you're listening from some words that say text me a message. It's a great idea, don't get me wrong. I love hearing from you, and whether that's your thoughts on the episodes, some questions, messages of appreciation. I just love the feedback. It's really great. However, I feel it remiss of me to not thank you for them, but to not be able to respond directly to you. So if you have sent me a question, and I've got lots, and you haven't heard from me, there's a really good reason why. I actually don't have the ability in the technology to respond to you. They kind of expect that you would or I would answer the questions in the form of a show. And there's just kind of too many, and I just think it's just too personal not to do it that way. So I wanted to alert you to the fact that if you do send me a message through that connection option, I'm not going to be able to respond to you directly. So if you do have a question, and it is time sensitive, or you want to send me any kind of message, can I suggest the following 2 ways? 1, send me an email to whataboutvietnam@gmail.com. That is the email address that I have the most constant access to, and I will aim to get back to you ASAP. Secondly, if you go to the website for the podcast, which is whataboutvietnam.com, if you scroll right to the bottom, there is a chance for you to leave a voice message. Now, in that voice message, I can respond to you equally with a response in voice. So if you want a quick response, that's your next best way. But I just wanted to get this into the show, make you aware of this, as it really is becoming problematic. And I've just got too many, and I can't kind of go naming people and answering each question. That's just a little bit silly. So if you have sent me a text message before and you're waiting on a message back as a response, I'm so sorry. I cannot do that. But if you want to send the question again, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Well, yeah. So Quinnon, as you said, great secret for travellers, but is becoming quite commercialised now. I think the first time, as I think I said to you earlier, the first time I ever went to Vietnam, 15, 17 years ago, I went to a business networking function in the very early days. So it was very, very, very basic networking in those days, and I won a door prize, and that door prize was a weekend at a brand new eco resort south of Quinnon. So, of course, the next time I went back, I flew up there, and that would have been my first ever experience into out of Ho Chi Minh City, except for the usual things, which is Mekong or Cu Chi tunnels and things like that. So it was my first sort of outside of Ho Chi Minh experience, and it was a very, very high level resort, but it was quite a remote destination. I remember getting met at the airport in this beautiful brand new Land Cruiser with white leather upholstery, which I really didn't put in there, and taken on a drive about an hour south of Quinnon out onto this peninsula on these dirt roads, where there was this brand new eco resort where there was 6 villas and personal butlers in each room, and your own little pool and your own beach hut. With personal staff, and you pick up the phone and the butler came running. I remember saying, it's lunchtime. Can we get something to eat? And the butler brought the chef down to the room, and he said, "Oh, we've got some. Overnight, we've bought some. I think it was sea bass or something off the fishermen out the front, because you can see all little round fishing boats out in the bay." And then next thing, this whole fish arrives that's been done with rice paper and vegetables and herbs and things to roll with rice paper. So it was an amazing resort. It was being run by a young 25-year-old Swiss graduate American guy graduating, absolutely amazing young guy. Growing all their own vegetables and herbs, just, beautiful resort. And they had their own fish farm as well across the hill. And I remember going over for lunch and sitting on the dock at the fish farm, choosing your fish out of the fish farm. I don't know what happened to it. I'm assuming it's still there, but I had never heard about that resort again. And everyone keeps saying, it must be a sixth sense, but it's not. It was independent. But, Quinnon area is absolutely gorgeous to look at. It's a beautiful beach area. It's quite remote, and I went back there again about a year ago, just under a year ago, and for a different reason, and stayed in town and had a look around. And it's like a mini Da Nang. It's probably like Da Nang was 15 to 20 years ago.
Okay.
Where before the masses of beach resorts and explosion of tourism. So it's a beautiful place to go, a little bit off the beaten track.
Is there a lot to do there?
Oh, there's heaps to do. Look, it's like everything. There's islands off there too, so you can explore that. You can go out on boats, explore the island. There's snorkeling. There's just beaches you can go to. When I go over there, I quite often take my own mask and snorkel. I don't take flippers and things because it's too much, but I take my own sort of bit of snorkeling stuff to have a look around. As you know, Kerry, a lot of places in Vietnam, you might see one fish and it's scared because it's, there is issues with fishing out the place a bit, and there's not yet a realisation about ecological tourism or ecological management of tourism in Vietnam and areas. And Halong Bay would be an example, a beautiful place, but, you go in the water and you won't see a fish. So, it's one of those things that needs to be worked on in Vietnam, is the management of the environment alongside tourism and business.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of work being done on that space and a lot of environmental management in corporate business around other things like packaging and things that the rest of the world are working on. But I think when you go to those places, one of the detractors that needs to be worked on, if we can talk to some of the little quirky things, is just the amount of floating rubbish and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
And how that detracts from those beautiful places. I saw one recently on a Facebook group around Vietnam, and it was this beautiful place with all these beautiful seaweed beds and people taking selfies standing on the seaweed beds. And my comment was, this is a beautiful place, but it won't remain beautiful if people don't preserve it. If they keep standing on the seaweed beds taking selfies, they're not going to be any beauty for anybody else to share. So, you get these amazing places, but I guess how are they going to be managed and maintained as from an eco perspective? The challenge between fish farms and tourism and the understanding of maintaining beaches and dealing with rubbish and packaging and things is still a challenge in a lot of areas, unfortunately.
And I think it's a point that we need to raise, and it comes up intermittently when I'm talking to various guests about rubbish management, around waste, around seeing it. I guess the tourist footprint and the impact it is making on the environment with plastics and all the rest. It is some circles that I mix in Vietnam tourism, etc., do tell me that they're aware of it, they know about it, and there's a lot of working group parties that are trying to engage with professionals and people that are specialised in this to come up with solutions. I think the sad part for me and for everyone listening about this is that some people will then kind of dismissed Vietnam in the sense because that they haven't addressed it at this point, and it doesn't look great, and it can put them off the whole scene. But I guess if we could kind of put it in the context that Vietnam is growing at such a rate and speed that I think it's having trouble keeping up with itself, and certainly with 60 or 70 million people in the domestic travel market, I'm feeling their footprint just as much as my own as a foreigner. And I think there's going to be a lot more said about this and done about this in the future. But I just hope people can say, look, yeah, it's not great. It needs to be addressed, but don't dismiss Vietnam because in some of these locations it isn't well managed at this point. So it's kind of a work in progress, for want of a better description.
I had some interaction with one of the municipal councils in a major city during COVID to introduce them to the head of the UN Environmental Waste Council and things like that to help them. They're seriously looking at these things. I think there's not yet a societal awareness of just, I'll just chuck that plastic bag down into the area at the back and it doesn't really matter, There's still, and I think that's also about, we're still talking about an emerging economy, and I think we're seeing that in people's attitudes are still such that they're not, still focusing on how do I make a dollar, put food on the table, not necessarily what I worry about.
Just one of the other areas that I wanted to talk about was Hue.
Yeah, Hue is amazing. I mean, 1,000-year-old citadel that was the capital of Vietnam at the time. You can still see sort of bullet marks across some of the fascias from previous conflicts from in the late 60s and early 70s. It's an amazing place to go historically. It's a beautiful place to go, and there's still cheap accommodation available in Hue. There's good food. Like any tourist destination, it has challenges around the commercialisation aspect. But I think, and the volume of people, pre-COVID, when I went through there, it was crazy with the number of buses and the number of people trying to get in and out of the citadel to have a look at it. But that said, I think if you're on holiday, you tend to forget a little about those things. You just say, look, I'm on a holiday and I'm going to enjoy myself, and I know I need to stand in some queues, and I know there's going to be other people on a holiday too. So I think if you put that aside and you're not trying to rush, you can have a great time wandering around in Hue. And we talked a little bit earlier about the different the different empires that have been through Vietnam, or what is now Vietnam, over the years, and there is history across Vietnam where in places like Hue, and in My Son, which is south of Da Nang, where there's history there that's being worked on and explored to look at how that has developed the culture of the people and their belief systems and their family cultural values that you can experience when you go to these places. And you get a feel for why the people of Vietnam are what they are, because you go and experience some of the history of the hardship or of the different sort of ruling people that have been through. And when you look at the history of Vietnam, pre the 20th century, it's quite interesting to look at those sorts of things. And you see that in Hue, you see that in Hue An with the Japanese influence, 600-year-old Japanese fishing town. You see it in Ninh Binh with the 10th century capital city when the river was obviously a lot bigger, and things like that. So, there's those sorts of historical things if you've got a bent towards that sort of tourism where you can get in and really explore some of the history of what makes Vietnam, the country it is today.
Yeah. And the people that is today and the influences from north to south, just how different they are, how it influences the food, clothing, their farming styles, their eating styles,
So socially they're different people. People used to say to me, everyone says it, what do you prefer? Do you prefer Ho Chi Minh or Hanoi? And I used to prefer Ho Chi Minh because the people were a lot more relaxed in the south. I'm finding that the people in Hanoi now are becoming more relaxed because they're becoming more used to Westerners, and tourists and what they need to do. We're certainly talking about the Old Town Hue Kiem area in that conversation. But and Ho Chi Minh is becoming now a major high-rise sort of city with developments, and there's a swing. Although a lot of people in the south will tell you otherwise, but I do feel there's a lot more embracing of tourism and people in the north now, and more acceptance and more openness and more smiles and more friendliness than there was 10 plus years ago.
Absolutely, absolutely. Simon, I'm aware of time, so I'm just wanting to wrap up if we may. Do you have any last kind of comments that you'd like to talk to, just around our main focus at land-based travel?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is don't be scared to land in, most international flights embark into Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh. Don't be scared just to say, look, I've got a couple of days of accommodation booked in a hotel or an Airbnb or whatever it might be. Don't be scared not to do that. When you go to those cities, you will find every type of global food that you'd find anywhere else. You can have, Thai food, Indian food, American hamburgers, steak houses, pasta and Italian, French, all those influences of food are there. So don't be scared if you've got dietary beliefs and you think you're going to land in Vietnam and have to eat just Vietnamese food for 30 days straight, because sometimes our Western bellies can't do that. So I think we've got to be cognitive that they are international cities. So everything you need is there. You've probably touched before in other podcasts around things like, medical services and insurance and all those things. But, all those services you need are going to be there. My recommendation to people is also get yourself a local SIM card. I have a Vietnamese SIM card I put in my main phone, so I've got all my data-based stuff, and then I put my Australian SIM card in a secondary phone so I can still receive texts and phone calls from Australia if I need to from a business perspective. But I have a local SIM card. I put it in my Australian phone, and then I'm internet connected to all the apps and all the travel apps and all the things like that. Get onto, without advertising, get onto Grab before you go and set up your Grab account, because Grab is the way people get around if they're not using taxi.
Absolutely. Swear by it.
It's just your Uber equivalent. It's the same thing. It's a fantastic service, and don't be scared to grab your water bottle and go for a walk. I spend a lot of time in Vietnam when I'm between work engagements, walking around the places I'm in. It doesn't matter where I am, but certainly in the cities. And I just say, look, especially post-COVID, when I was there last year in May and then again in June and then September and October and December, I spent a lot of time just walking around, not in the middle of the day when it's 36 degrees, but in the evening. And I just put a shorts, T-shirt and a pair of joggers on, and I just walk up and down the streets and say, what's new, what's closed, what's not there anymore, and get a feel for what's going on in the city, get into the vibe, walk down the back alleyways. The best places that you're ever going to find in those places are the back alleyways of the cities.
And, once again, that's another good point that you brought up. I think Westerners have been trained, or from a societal perspective, you don't go down alleys, alleys are dangerous and that. Because I know just recently in Ho Chi Minh City, I was taking my sisters down this alley and they're going, Kerry, do you really know where you're going? We love you and all the rest of it, but seriously. And I'd go, no, look, just trust me. And sure enough, we'd go down this alley and the next thing we're going up these stairs and then, we're in the Catnat building and there's beautiful boutiques and coffee shops and all of this kind of going.
Little courtyards with trees and light food.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think, and I know time constraints, but look, the other thing is get out of, Ho Chi Minh is district-based like Paris, so District 1.
Yes.
Get out of District 1. Don't go to necessarily District 5 for the backpack area is not the only place to go, but you get out of those places. Go out into District 3, District 10, whatever it might be. Have a little bit of a wander around, start in the daytime to make yourself feel comfortable. And, you'll find things like a whole street of plumbing supplies and a whole street of coffee and a whole street of kitchen supplies. And it's amazing to get into those places. And that's why I say, again, grab, because you can get grab motorbike.
Yes.
If you want to they have a second helmet, whack it on, sit in the motorbike and say,
yep.
I did this in Hanoi with some friends one year. I had 10 friends with me. We just walked down the road. We got 10 Grab guys. We said, how much for 4 hours? Take us around town. And they took us all over town. Ended up being 6 hours. We went to an amazing restaurant that you never find unless you're a local for lunch.
Yep.
You just saw all these things that you wouldn't see by going down all the back alleys and stopping and the experience, that's the experience of Vietnam. It's not sit in my international hotel and talk to other travelers while I have an air-conditioned buffet breakfast. When I stay in Vietnam, or stay in Ho Chi Minh now, I stay in an Airbnb apartment where I now know the guys that runs it. So I talk to him directly. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. It's in an old alleyway. I have ladies who have got 5 or 6 different choices of dish all day, every day downstairs as I walk out with braziers. I've got a coffee shop on the same floor. I've got a Japanese restaurant downstairs. I've got a pizza place downstairs. I've got, a noodle place around the corner. I've got anything I want within 100 meters. But I'm a part of Vietnam's ecosystem. I'm not sitting in an international hotel in a dog box room that's decorated like every other hotel in the world. And I walk out of my room and I've got 50 stairs up and down, so that's okay. But I'm walking up and down with the locals who live in that apartment block.
Yeah, and I think if you want to feel like you've been to Vietnam, that's what you've got to do.
Sure.
I think a lot of people do stick with their favorite brands in hotels and they want that luxury experience, and that sensory overload for some is just a little bit too much to take on. But I think, and one thing I really want to encourage people is that you're probably most likely not 100% not going to see or feel all of Vietnam in one visit. It's just kind of impossible to get to everywhere in one visit, in my opinion. I think if you can kind of stage it and say, look, let's just do the north and have a look at the north, or let's have a look at some of the main areas in the south, or maybe concentrate just in a region, maybe the centre and the north.
And look, the other thing is we've now got three direct airline flights in and out of Australia. We've got three brands now flying directly, and as of June, Vietjet flies directly from Brisbane to Ho Chi Minh City, which is great.
Correct.
For Queenslanders. But we've got in Sydney and Melbourne, we've got Vietjet, Bamboo, and Vietnam Airlines flying direct flights. So there's lots of choices at lots of prices, at lots of different travel levels there. And I think you've got to walk past those alleyways and look at them and walk. No one's going to have a go at you. No one's going to mug you walking down an alley in the daytime in Vietnam. They might, I often say, look, sometimes I used to say to my friends and family, I feel like my spaceship's just landed because I must have 2 heads. The way they look at you. But that doesn't matter. I just smile and I walk down and I find the best places. I found some amazing little bars, amazing coffee shops and little restaurants There's one place I go to in off Pasteur in Ho Chi Minh City, and I walk up 4 flights of stairs past people's washing in apartments and outdoor kitchens to get to this little
to find
restaurant.
it. Yeah,
It's amazing. And the feel of those places is, look at the steps, and people have been walking up and down those steps for 100 years,
I know.
with their lifestyles. And you look out across the rooftops and the chimney stacks and the hot water systems and the cats. And, I remember being in Hanoi one morning, roosters crowing next door, next to the hotel on the rooftop, and there's a cat on the other side and 2 dogs barking. And, it's being amongst that stuff that makes Vietnam different than Australia. Even if the roosters wake up at 5:30, get up, go out, yell at it, but get up and enjoy it and walk around the town. Vietnam has different times of day that it opens up. 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, all the people are going off to work for the early day, and you walk outside and it's a different world. But then you hit the middle of the day, or the 10 or 11 o'clock, and all the shops and all the shutters go up and everything's starting to open up from a point of view of commerce. And then, of course, as you go into the evening, and Vietnamese people will come back out again because there's no sun, because they don't like the sun. So therefore, there's a whole new world. The lights, the motorbikes, the young people, the bars, the coffee shops. I've been on the street, sitting on the little kids' tables and chairs on streets in towns and cities, eating, and suddenly a motorbike pulls up and 2 or 3 young girls get off the back with a boombox and they start dancing on the street, promoting a nightclub somewhere, and they get back on again and they ride off, just totally random stuff happens. And you don't be scared to go into those little cafes and sit on the kids' tables and chairs, because you'll eat the best food. I was going to say, I've only ever been sick once in Vietnam in almost 20 years, in 60 plus trips. And it was an international 5-star hotel breakfast buffet where the capsicum for the omelette was off. I've never been sick with street food. I've never had never ever had a bad meal in Vietnam. I've had a couple of average ones, but never had a bad meal. And those little cafes on the street, they put the tables and chairs out at night time, and you sit down and you don't go in the kitchen. You don't want to know about it. But look at the food, and you will find some of the most amazing fresh food. And pre-Vietnam, I would never have eaten snails. I would never have eaten duck egg embryos. I would never have eaten goat meat barbecued, and all these other amazing things. But when you start into those sorts of food in Vietnam, right now I'm salivating in my mouth thinking of going back to eat Vietnam. And every time I get on the plane here to go, I start thinking about what am I going to eat each day and what those flavours going to be. And I start getting hungry, because there's, you get the most unsuspecting meals in the most unsuspecting places by just sitting down in some little cafe and trying to work out, say I've got a bit of Vietnamese, but, work out what is on the menu, do some sign language about what it is that you're about to eat, and say, look, I'll just have that. And then don't worry about what it is, dip it in whatever's with it. And it's just amazing. Every time it is just amazing.
I know.
And that's the influence of Vietnam. And ask the young kids will come up and they'll say, oh, yeah, go get me a beer, will you? And they'll go across to the shop and buy you a beer, come back. I remember sitting on the beach in Nha Trang years ago. Lady came up with, the stick across her shoulders with 2 pots. She had lobster with her son. I was at the sailing club on the lilos out there, and she came up and she put down the grass, the reed mat, sat down, pulled out a fresh lobster she just bought at the markets that day, marinated it, put the brazier down, cooked the lobster. Her son went up and bought some beers at the shop and brought them back. And I sat there and had fresh cooked lobster with rice, vegetables, corn on a brazier, sweet potato on the brazier, and beer on the beach. And it cost me like $5.
I was going to say it'd cost you about $5. Yeah, I was going to say.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared to get involved. No one's trying to rip you off. Even the guys who walk around polish your shoes. Just be careful they don't run off with your shoes. But they're just trying to make a living. They're just trying to make a living. They're not there to scam you. They're just trying to make a living. Stay away from offers of drugs. Stay away from offers of pool parlours and young girls and karaoke and that sort of thing when people go past on motorbikes. But don't be scared of the old guys that say, do you want a motorbike? Because those old guys will know everything that moves in that town you're in.
Yeah,
everywhere to go.
Simon, I'm so glad to have you on, because you kind of support and speak of with a passion and love of Vietnam as I feel. So I feel like I'm vindicated just by having you on. So that's really terrific.
Amazing, Gary. And I have to say, I really appreciate the conversation because it teases out. I visualize these experiences, I talk about them, and, I'm just sitting there saying, I better get on and book my next trip because I want to just go back and I want to experience those things, and I want to go and do those things again. And look, my son will come in from the other room and listening to the end of our bits of our conversation here. And he always says, when are we going back? When are we going back? Because he's always thinking about what the next experience is.
Yes, and, I have a bit of withdrawal when I come back because, I, bit like you, I get out and about and I experience these things. So, life back here sometimes feels a little bit vanilla after, time in Vietnam. So it takes a little bit of reconditioning when you get back because the experiences and the energy and the people, the openness, all of that just is it gets under your skin.
The French used to call it Indochina malade, which is, the Indochina sickness that you catch and never want to go home.
Yeah.
Malade, yeah, they used to call it Indochina sickness. And with Cambodia and Vietnam, as parts of France many years ago. But, and French people would disappear and just never come back, But I think that, my advice is when you're coming back and you go, I'm going to miss that, is book the next trip before you come back.
Yeah.
And I do. I sit in Vietnam and I go.
I do too.
Because then I start to look forward to what happens on the next one.
Simon, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll leave it there, but I look forward to talking with you again and just thank you for your time and sharing some of your experiences. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Check out the episode notes for more information.
What about Vietnam?
Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review, and stay tuned for more fun adventures in Vietnam.
What about Vietnam?